أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته طيبين طاهرين معصومين صالحين. Inshallah, it's truly a pleasure for me to stand before you guys again. And the subject that was given to me is a beautiful subject, and for those of you that were here with us last year, I hate to begin this session the way I began it last session, but I have to because sometimes we forget what it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the glorious Quran, "This day I have perfected your religion for you, completed my favor upon you, and have chosen for you Islam as your religion." As Muslims, have we truly come to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in Islam? I was asked to speak about acting on the dangers facing our youth today. If there are dangers, are there solutions for us to avoid the dangers? Can we pull ourselves out of dangerous situations? What are the ways that we go about doing it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the answers to all of these questions in Islam. So the subjects that I was asked to lecture on today are very important. I've decided to address each and every one of these points that they have given to me to discuss. But more importantly, I will open up the session to question and answer session, and more importantly than the question and answer session, a discussion. Because many times when we come to conferences, or we go to listen to our ulama give lectures, that's all it is. It's a lecture where we're talking to you. But we can't really come up with solutions to our problems if we don't speak to one another. So for those of you who know me, we're going to talk today. Sometimes you may not want to talk, but you're going to talk anyway, inshallah. So to begin, I would like to give you what was given to me in an outline. The problems leading to youth depression. So I'm supposed to deal with those things that cause depression in our youth. The first subsets are the search for Islamic identity. B, self-esteem, and it's broken down into subsessions, body image and material. And then C, we have choosing the right friends, peer pressure, bullying, intergender relations, early on stress, wearing hijab. Second section, our parents being understanding. Subset, our parents expecting too much or expecting the wrong things. And finally, how do we help our teens or our youth overcome these issues? Many of you know that I study psychology. I have a degree in psychology, alhamdulillah. And the problems that were asked for me to discuss and to go over are very serious problems. So I don't want to trivialize any of them. But the first thing I was asked to talk about is depression. And we're going to get deeper into depression because sometimes we don't have a true understanding of what depression is. And what people are depressed about nowadays, should they even be depressed about that? But our children are saying they're depressed now. Why are they saying that they're depressed? A friend of mine, when I was in California over the first 10 nights of Muharram, he said to me, you know, if a person reads the Quran every day, he will never be depressed. I agree with him wholeheartedly. But as Muslims, if you're not reading the Quran every day, and you fall into depression, whose fault is it? It's yours. So, inshallah, we're going to deal with this depression, and we're going to deal with these other issues. And the list is daunting. There are a lot of things there. But it's only daunting by the way that we view those problems. Every generation from the beginning of mankind has always believed that his generation had it harder than any other generation that came before theirs. They say that the problems that their children have are more difficult than the problems that they gave to their parents. And you could go all the way back to the beginning of time and you'll see that this is the pattern. Our generation, we can make that claim because we do have things that are different from those of our parents. When I was growing up, when I was 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, no one had cell phones. The home computer was something that very few people had. But the reality is that throughout time, people don't change. Technology changes, so the games and the toys that we have change with it. Today we have a better form of transportation. Today we have better houses, we have indoor plumbing. Some people laugh about that, but only 50, 60 years ago, not everybody in this country had indoor plumbing. We have television. We have internet. We have all of these beautiful gadgets, but does that change the core essence of who the human being is? It doesn't. Because back then we had confident people and insecure people. Back then we had extroverted people and introverted people. Back then we had good people and bad people the same way we do today. The thing that determined how a person was going to be in life was how it was their parents were going to raise them and the support system that their parents had in helping them to adjust in the societies that they were living in. In today's world, just like back then, you had crime. You had people lying, cheating, stealing. What was the answers to stop those people from doing it? It was Islam. Today the answers are still the same. But the question that I have to ask you guys is, what is your support system? What is helping you to promote Islam to your children? There's an African proverb, and that African proverb says, it takes a village to raise a child. What is your village? What is your support group? By show of hands, inshallah, how many of you live near the Islamic center that you attend? Alhamdulillah. By show of hands, how many of you live by or close to Muslims that you attend the masjid with or the Islamic center with? I thought the numbers would get bigger, but they're getting smaller. Now let me do this. I don't want to see any hands from those who are from Dearborn. It's unfair. But you guys have the answer, alhamdulillah. So for those people who don't live in Dearborn, how many of you live near the Islamic center that you attend? How many of you live near the people that you attend the masjid with? Alhamdulillah. Very good. I needed to see about 75%. I saw about maybe 35, 40%, which is good. How many of you go to your friends' houses during the year on a regular basis? How many of you visit your Muslim friends on a weekly basis? Alhamdulillah. So you have a very good village. How many of you in your centers, Dearborn people, come back? How many of you guys have Islamic programs for Saturdays and Sundays? How many of you send your children to Islamic schools on a full-time basis? It's not expensive, Shaykh. Huh?
It's expensive, you cannot.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that too. Inshallah.
We don't have kids.
Yeah, we're going to discuss that too. Because you have that. I'm going to keep that to myself. But, and the final question is, how many of you attend your centers for Salatul Jummah? I need someone to get a camera and take a picture of this. Because it's maybe 20 people out of all of these people that are here, only 20 people raised their hand Salatul Jummah? How many of you are at your masjids for Dua Kumel? How many of you that go to Dua Kumel understand everything that's being said in Dua Kumel? I need another picture. It's not enough people. Why am I asking you all of these questions? Because your support group begins with the Islamic Center. If you do not support your Islamic centers, your children are going to go astray. Because I asked you these questions because on a daily basis, there are only a handful of you who send your children to Islamic schools, but you send your children to school every day in a Western secular society. And in this Western secular society, their worldview is being placed on your children. So if you send your children to school five days a week, they don't go to Salatul Jummah, many of them don't have a Saturday or a Sunday school. How many of you have adult classes at your centers? Get another picture. Wait a minute. It's only a handful of assistants who say that there's a program for the adults. What happens with us is, by the time our children get 14 or 15 years old, the Sunday school classes are over. So how do we continue to learn about Islam if there are no programs going on for our older generations? If their Islamic IQ is not elevated, then how do we expect for the children's Islamic IQs to also be elevated? We can't. And if we do, we're only fooling who? Ourselves. So again, the first thing that we have to be able to do is to establish an Islamic worldview. Because believe me, brothers and sisters, your children's secular and Western view is beautiful from that point of view. They can tell you about the politics. They can tell you about what's going on YouTube. They can tell you what's going on Facebook. They can tell you all the things that happens in this life and what they feel is important. We promote this. We promote secular education because we want our children to go to the best schools. How many of you send your children to a school outside of your neighborhood? Very good. How many of you have children that went to college and you spent money on the LSAT, the MCAT, the GRE? Good. Now, how many of you have spent money on upper education in Islam for your children? Eight people. We would drive our children 50 miles out of the way if we knew that their education could be increased. We would spend $2,000 on a course for the LSAT if we knew that it would ensure our children would be able to get into a good law school. The MCAT for those who want to go to a good medical school. The GRE for everything else. But how many of us are willing to spend the same amount of money on making sure that our children get into Jannah? Who wants to go to heaven? Who wants to spend the money in order to learn what it takes to go to heaven? How many of you are actually spending that money? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the glorious Quran that the difficulties that face us in life are brought about by what? Our own two hands. I'm going to move on, inshallah. I don't want to spend too much time in talking about what the Muslims aren't doing. But I do want to talk about the effects when we don't put in the time, the effort, and the monies to take care of our children. It affects them adversely. Now, I talked a little bit about the westernized worldview. But in Islam, there is an Islamic worldview. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us information about everything in life. I'm going to ask one question before I continue. Can anybody in this hall give me one problem that is not addressed by Islam? Anybody? Scholars included. One problem that is not addressed by Islam. If no one can tell me a problem that is not addressed by Islam, then why do we have so many problems? Have we given our children the answers to those problems from the Islamic point of view? If we haven't, then have we done our jobs as parents? I want to get into this list now, inshallah, and we'll begin at the top. The question is, the problems leading to youth depression. Now, there are two types of depression that I want to deal with. One type of depression I'm just going to define a little bit, and the other part of depression I'm going to really get into. The first depression I'm going to talk about is depression that really is depression. Somebody has a chemical imbalance. They aren't able to deal with things in a proper way because there's something wrong with them mentally. And these people need medicine. These people are legitimately depressed. It's nothing that they can do by themselves, for the most part, to correct them from being depressed. We're not going to talk about them today. So erase that from your mind and just remove all of that. What I want to talk about is depression as defined by the dictionary, and depression how our world defines it. Depression is defined as a state of being depressed, a state of feeling sad, a mood disorder marked especially by sadness and activity, difficulty with thinking or concentration, a significant increase in or decrease in appetite and time spent sleeping, feeling of dejection, hopelessness, and sometimes suicidal thoughts or an attempt to commit suicide. As Muslims, none of this should come towards us. As Muslims. But it does. Why? Because we have this westernized way of thinking. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So, when we talk about this the depression, I don't want to trivialize it, but this disease can be devastating. But when discussing depression, we have to separate what it is that we're talking about. Most people, when they say that they're depressed, you've heard the people, especially those of you who are in school, you ask them, well, why are you depressed? I never thought my life would turn out this way. Well, how did it turn out? I made a B on my paper, and my roommate, they made an A. I'm so depressed, I want to kill myself. Is that depression? The next person says, oh, my house, I only have 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and my house is the smallest house in the neighborhood. Is that depression? No. They say, oh, I drive a BMW, but my car is 5 years old. I have to go kill myself now. Is this depression? Or some of you who are really young, I remember when I was in the second grade, they was teaching us subtraction. And they said, well, how old would you be in 1996? We did the math. And everybody said, 25 years old. And everybody in the classroom was 7 years old at the time. We said, oh God, we're old. 25 is just too old. You have people right now who say, I just turned 35, I want to kill myself. I'm depressed. Is this depression? But most of the people that go to get help about depression, this is what it is that they're complaining about. Why are they complaining about this? It's because this world is telling them when you get past the age of 30, you're getting old. If you don't have the best house, you're not living life. If you don't have this type of degree, you're nothing. So they get depressed by that, and for me, that's foolishness, but it's real to them. Those people, let's move them to the side. But let's talk about real issues. Real issues like number one, you find out that you or a loved one has a terminal or a chronic disease. This is hurtful. How do you deal with that? You lost your job and you don't know how it is that you're going to pay your bills. This has an ability to be depressing. Your neighbors, their house burned down. This is depressing. You lose one of your loved ones. This is depressing. This could lead you to have this true definition of what depression is. But as Muslims, should we be depressed by any of this? If you lose your job as Muslims, what should our thought pattern be? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me the job to begin with. And inshallah, Allah will give me another job. Right now, if you talk about death and losing people, we are still in the time of mourning as we approach the death of Imam Ali Rida alayhi salatu wasalam. As we approach Arba'een for Imam Hussein alayhi salam and those that were with him at Karbala, we always say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We all belong to who? And our return must be to who? So in this life, when our children are talking about being depressed, or we have problems that we're dealing with, we let them know, number one, that this earth, this life that we live in is only a test. It's only a trial. We're only here for a small amount of time. Anything that we gain in this world is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our Razak. He is our provider. Without Him, we have nothing. And if we depend on ourselves for anything, we're the ones who are the fools. So when we get into these things, as far as being depressed, we come into the three Ds. What are the 3 Ds? And we have to teach our children about it. The 3 Ds are despair, despondence, and depression. How many of you know that despair is a major sin? That's not enough people. What is despair? Can anybody give me a definition of despair? Yes, ma'am. Losing hope. This is the best definition, except for one part. As Muslims, it's losing hope, but it's losing hope in who? In Allah. Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq said that there is no believer that does not exist between hope and fear. Hope in that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue to put His mercy on us, and fear that we lose favor with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we begin to despair, then we go into what's called despondence. Despair, the word is yas. Then we go into despondence. Does anyone know what despondence means? I know we got some social workers here, psychologists. Despondence is the step after despair. Despondence means that you begin to act on the despair. You begin to talk about it. You begin to act on it. You say, oh, I can't pay my bills. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to help you with the bills. Allah can't do that. This is despondence. When you have despondence, the word for despondence is qunut. This is a major sin. What does this lead to? Amnun makrillah, which is not believing in, or not putting faith in, or not understanding the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given mankind what? Imla. Imla is what? Respite. Because we don't get punished right now, we think that we'll never get punished. We call this what? The slippery slope. And if we don't teach our children not to despair, not to act on that despair, not to believe or trust in the punishment of Allah, then they become what? Depressed. And when they become depressed, whose fault is it? If we have not taught our children, that's it. It's our fault. What I want to do is, inshallah, I want to go through the list, and I'm going to go through it fairly quickly because time is running. The first thing I want to talk about is from the outline that I was given. They asked about searching for an identity. In America, how do they want us to identify ourselves? When we identify ourselves here in America, the first thing we identify ourselves with is the land that we were born in, or the land that we live in. They want us to be called what? Americans. America is called the melting pot. Why is it called the melting pot? Because America wants to take everything that comes into it and make it homogeneous. It doesn't want us to be different. It wants us to take on American ideals and American culture, and sometimes it's good, but in most cases, it's bad. When your children go to school, not just your children, but all the children that immigrate to this country, for my social workers, you know what I'm talking about here. If your child is the child of an immigrant, whether you come from Russia or Italy or Japan or anywhere else, does your child want to speak the native language in the schools? No. You know why? Because they look at it as different. They look like they're not Americans. So the children begin to bully them and make fun of them, and they want to walk away from their culture. Why? Because in America they want you to be an American. But how do we stop that? The first thing we have to do is we have to establish the Islamic identity. We establish that by going through the mandates that are given to us in the Quran. If we're not teaching the Quran to our children, how can they have this Muslim identity? Some people say, if you're not American, you're not the best. But as Muslims, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we are the best. But what makes us the best? We are the best because we believe in Allah. He is our Lord. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is our Prophet. The Quran is our book, and the Imams, Ahlul Bayt, are our guides. This is what makes us better than anything else, or better than anyone else. If we instill in our children that this is what makes us better, then we can stop them from becoming depressed. The next thing we talk about is self-esteem. When we tell our children that they're the best, and teach them what it takes to be the best, then they'll be okay. The next thing is materials. The God of the West is materialism. And people will do anything to gain those materials. They'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll steal, they will kill. To do what? To obtain the almighty dollar, to obtain the almighty material. And if you don't have the materials, you're looked at as being less than a human being. But again, who is it that gives us the materials? Allah. So when we teach our children that these materials only come from Allah, and we help to expound on it with them, then we become the best of people. And they become the best of people too. The next few, I'm going to put them all together. Choosing the right friends, peer pressure, bullying, and intergender relations, and early on stress. Choosing the right friends is an activity that has to be done with the parents and the children. Parents, move closer to your Islamic centers. Parents, become active in your Islamic centers. Parents, make sure they have after-school programs in your Islamic centers. Children, make sure you choose your friends based on the way that they act. Because brothers and sisters, believe you me, the problems that we're having right now is that our children are talking to their friends, their peers. Now, for parents, how many of you know what mollies are? Bath salts, synthetic weed, cough medicines, prescription drugs. If you're a parent and you're not raising your hand, you missed the boat. Because this is what your kids have to deal with. All of these things that I just mentioned just then are called khamr, or intoxicants. And your friends, your children's friends are telling them about this. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to do what? Avoid all intoxicants. Are we having a conversation with our children about the intoxicants? They're being bullied, not bullied with somebody fighting them, but they're being bullied with ideologies. Intergender relationships. We send our kids to school every day. They sit next to boys and girls. My youth in here, you know what I'm talking about. You done gave one of your girls, you done gave your homeboy a high five. You done shook hands, hugged each other. How many of the parents are actually sitting down and talking to their children about not doing this? Or better yet, are explaining why they shouldn't do it. If you're not explaining it to your children when they're going to school, why do you make such a big fuss about it when they go to the Islamic Center? Now you want to separate them. Your children see this as hypocrisy. In no generation was it ever acceptable for the parents to say, do as I say, not as I do. And it is the same here. We have to teach our children by examples of what to do and what not to do. And with all of this, I'm going to move on to hijab. The hijab is something that's very important. Khimar and jilbab appears in the Quran. But what is hijab? What does it mean? Are the Muslims the first group of people that were ordered to observe hijab? No. The Jews, those who came before us, before the Christians, those who read the books of Musa, والسلام, they have something called zinat. Yeah, we know the word zinat also. But this is what we look at as beautification. The word to zinat in Hebrew, it means modesty, humility, guarding one's privacy. What does hijab mean? Modesty, humility, guarding one's privacy. The khimar and the jilbab are only tools to help us in that. But the first hijab that we must tell to our students is the hijab of society. How are we supposed to act towards one another? Should we be giving our homeboys high fives if we're girls? You grew up with this guy, should you be hugging on him? I know he got swag and he look good. What's up with you, mommy? They want to hug you, they want to talk to you. As parents, we have to instill this social hijab so that when they go to school, they continue to have what? Modesty, humility, and to protect their privacy. I'm going to speed up just a little bit because I don't want to get these last two in. The question is, are the parents being understanding? Are parents expecting too much or expecting the wrong things? The quick answer to that is, as parents, if you're not speaking to your children, are you expecting too much? Yes. Are you expecting the wrong thing? Yes. Here's the reality. I told you guys last year that the psychologists have said that by the age of 13, parents are no longer the major influence on their children. If you as parents are not talking to your children, explaining to them the Islamic worldview, what does Islam say about homosexuality? Well, Islam says that not only is it wrong, but if you think that it's okay, you know you're not a homosexual yourself, but you think it's okay, then the hellfire is for you too. Don't trust me. Go look it up. This is the Islamic worldview. What does Islam say to us about sex? Sex is a good thing. Alhamdulillah. After you're married. Get married first, then you can have all the sex you want to with your husband or your wife. We're not averse to any of that. If you're not teaching this to your children, are you doing the job? Because, like I said, you send your kids to school. How many of you, now those of you who live in Chicago, anybody live in Chicago? You guys know what I'm talking about. They have have a permission slip. They went to court about it because there were people that said they didn't want their children to have sex education in the schools, right? You familiar? Last year. What were these people teaching in these sex education classes? That homosexuality was okay and it was natural. How many of you are actually going through your kids' curriculum to see if this is being taught in your kids' school? If you're not inspecting what you expect, then how can you expect anything to be good? You can't. And the final thing is, how do we help our teens to overcome these issues? We have to give our teens the Islamic worldview. And that begins by sitting down with them, reading the Quran with them, and not only reading the Quran with them, but get yourself a good tafsir of the Quran. Attach yourself with the ulama. If you don't have a sheikh or a sayyid in your community or someone that takes the responsibility of teaching the kids, go online. These guys here, they're online. You catch them, listen to their lectures, call them up, get their information, talk to them, make sure that you have an understanding so that when you give your children the understanding, it's the best understanding. And there's nothing taboo in Islam. So don't feel afraid of speaking to your children about issues. Because if you don't talk to them about issues, their homeboys, their homegirls, their friends, all of them are telling them about, let's get high, let's roll a blunt. Let's go around the corner and drink this beer. My mom's not home, we're having a party at the house, bring your girlfriend. Don't take my word for it. For those of you, anybody in high school and in college, raise your hands. Did I lie about anything? Are these people trying to entice you to do these bad things? And I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Are your parents talking to you about it? Alhamdulillah. So inshallah, and don't be scared, I won't let them beat you. Inshallah, our job and our responsibilities as parents, as Muslims, as this village, because we are the village, we are the support system. We should not feel afraid to go to our children, to our neighbors' children, to our nieces, our nephews, because in the masjid, everybody's auntie and uncle, right? Act that way. Enjoy what is right, forbid what is wrong, and if you do that, our children will not fall into any of these bad things. Shukran Jazila, I think my time is up. I don't know how long we have. But if it's allowable, if you guys have questions or want to do discussions, with the permission of those who are the organizers, we continue, inshallah.